Hey babes, you'll already know this if you're really cool and exciting like I am, but in case you don't keep up with important global news like this, let me be the first to tell you that there was a big awards show for video games last week, which I guess they did to finally legitimize video games as an art form and as an industry, and so that it's just as awesome and epic as the music industry, or the TV industry, or the film industry, or whichever industry it is the Tony is an award for. I don't think anyone knows. Anyway, this serious awards show for video games was largely just a big delivery service for this year's most important ads for garbage. Just like the Super Bowl, except Hideo Kojima isn't paying as much attention.
But it has also evolved.
Amongst the trash peddled to the masses is the subject of today's discussion, a trailer for Game of Thrones King's Road, which appears to be a heaping serve of unlabeled school cafeteria slop someone left out in the sun for the past 9 hours, on which all the local flies are having a certified bonanza. By which I mean it's one of them mobile games for your Instagram machine. I have exceedingly little to say about the trailer itself. It's awful in the most unremarkable of ways, don't worry about it too much. It reveals basically nothing about the gameplay, so I don't understand the point even, but I guess that's what the games industry is like now that it's cool and legitimate. We've all seen Uncanny Valley Kit Harington before, and we've heard plenty of rough impressions of his voice, mine included.
It almost feels peaceful from up here, doesn't it?
We're not here to talk about how shameless Kit Harington is. Instead, I'd like to more broadly discuss how the Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones IPs have been treated in video game adaptations over the decades. Of course, grrm's work is no stranger to horrible, terrible, garbage, existentially threatening, and downright stinky television adaptations, but at least Game of Thrones was really good for a while. And House of the Dragon, we don't have time for that.
There's no time for any of them.
But the video game adaptations are an entirely different beast. Did you know there have been 12 officially licensed games in this franchise released over the past 13 years? Nobody? Just me? Let's do a quick rundown. The first was A Game of Thrones Genesis, a Windows-only RTS developed by Amusement Cyanide and released just a few months after the first season of Game of Thrones. Reviews seemingly agree that in spite of some interesting ideas, it wasn't very good and smelled like a tie-in cash grab. If anyone knows where I can buy it, I'd love to know because I'm turning over every stone and all I'm finding is cobwebs. Ice and Fire's strengths are in its characters, themes, and world. By all accounts, Genesis made a noble effort at integrating the theme of political subterfuge into an RTS game, which is cool, but a good game in this series would ideally be narrative and character focused. An RTS just isn't a very good fit. 2012 saw Cyanide's main studio release the RPG simply titled Game of Thrones. Set during the events of Season 1, featuring Game of Thrones actors James Cosmo and Conleth Hill, and apparently written in conjunction with grrm, it seems like a far more sincere effort at translating the property to a video game. The aesthetics are dated and the gameplay is uninspiring, but everyone lauds this game's writing, which is the one thing an Ice and Fire game ought to get right.
Hold your tongue, deserter. That's not what your mother said last night.
Wow, I love good writing. I look forward to playing this one soon. Maybe I'll stream it on twitch.tv/gliduslive, who knows? Wink wink. Why did I say wink? You can see me. I mean this with no derision. Cyanide is not a prestigious studio. They mostly made sports and management titles and scored a license to develop a literal fantasy football game based on Games Workshop's Blood Bowl by basically jumping the gun and making an unlicensed version first. What happened next is best described as settled out of court. Maybe this relationship with Games Workshop is how they convinced George and/or Random House to grant them an Ice and Fire license before the IP blew up in the early 2010s. In any case, it only gets worse from here. The next official game was Game of Thrones Ascent, developed in 2013 by Disruptor Beam. This was one of those menuing games for mobile platforms and web browsers, and perhaps most tellingly, Facebook. I never played it and it was shut down in 2019, but this rings of those idle Zynga games that Orteal satirized in Cookie Clicker. I did play Mafia Wars in 2010 or something, and this smells a lot like that, but with an actual story that followed the show's releases. I don't know, if anyone actually played this, let me know. The same company made Star Trek Timelines, if anyone played that one, and The Walking Dead March to War. Archer, Danger Phone, which honestly sounds amazing. In any case, this is obviously a huge step down from the RPG. We're going in the wrong direction. Now, if you were aware of any Game of Thrones games, you were aware of this one. I can't find the source for this claim, so I'll just have to take Wikipedia editor Marco Phoenix's word for it. Grrm said he wanted a Game of Thrones game to be made by a studio that knows how to create a thrilling and interesting story, and Telltale Games' episodic graphic adventure games adapting various dramas were a natural fit for Game of Thrones. After the critical and commercial success of their The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us games, Telltale secured the Game of Thrones license from HBO. George's protege and Expanse co-author Ty Frank worked on the game's story. Telltale was a reputable studio. The idea for the game made sense. Some high-name actors reprised their roles, and yeah, the game's good for what it is. I played a bit of it with Swift over on his 18th side channel some time ago, and we had fun, but it was too much to balance thinking about the game and talking to each other and reading chat, and you can stop asking us to finish it now.
Where was I?
You weren't born yet.
You fucking
It's
idiot.
so much-
That reminds me of the Mind Goblin.
Who's the Mind Goblin?
Mind Goblin these nuts.
You ligged with me.
They released 6 episodes of the game, and a second season was planned, but Telltale folded in 2018. The studio was later revived, but the Game of Thrones plans were seemingly dropped. I preferred the Strong Bad game anyway. So after this, Grrm's conviction to only have good games made by competent studios with thrilling and interesting stories must have heavily waned. It's either that or he had nothing to do with the decisions that were about to be made. I know this because in 2017, Warner Bros. Interactive released a steaming hot pile of dragon shit called Game of Thrones Conquest, solely for mobile platforms. Oh yeah, it's 2017, this franchise is really going places now. I can fucking customize my dragon. My life is finally complete. Whoop! Peter Dinklage really wants me to upgrade my dragon pit to level 24. Better get on that. They're still fucking going with this game apparently. It's doing House of the Dragon stuff now. Oh wow, the third result on Google Images for Corlys Velaryon is really compelling me to spend $1,000 on this pissy battery devourer. I never played Clash of Clans. Is this just Clash of Clans? Whose idea was this, and where do I mail this sock full of spider eggs? Now, that was awful, but a brief respite before things get really bad. 2018 saw indie darling Devolver Digital publish Nerial's Reigns, Game of Thrones, a spin-off of the Reigns series. Reigns is usually categorized as a strategy game. It's a randomized decision tree presented as a sort of card game, and you unlock more cards the more you play. Is this a roguelike card game? Eat your heart out, Balatro. You control a medieval ruler and you receive all these petitions and events, and your job is to not fucking die. I don't mind Reigns, it's a fun little diversion, and again, it's a decent fit for Game of Thrones, although the spin-off's execution is a little baffling. According to this article, the devs worked closely with HBO to make sure the game stayed true to the show, but, I mean, no. Not really. Canonicity is hand-waved by the game's events being framed as Melisandre's visions in the flames, so whatever, that's an okay device, I guess. The PC version is clearly just an upscaled mobile port with nice backgrounds, but look, it's fine for what it is. I don't mind it, but I don't think it's very good, and it's more than a bit grim that this is the closest to an actual game we've got in the past 10 years. What follows is perhaps the most disgusting thing that could have happened. Conquest is awful, but Yuzu Games' 2019 title Game of Thrones Winter is Coming is just fucking offensive. This is the one from those JXy videos.
From the bottom of my heart, geode.
And for that reason, I don't feel the need to rehash it. It's the one officially licensed Game of Thrones game where Jon Snow's name has an H. Suffice to say, it's a shameless, predatory, unrefined, sloppy hellscape of a game? I played Raid Shadow Legends for a few hours 3 years ago, the game that's literally a meme for being a soulless husk of generic humdrum, too boring to be called nonsense, whose only purpose is to siphon money from your credit card into their endless vat of YouTube sponsorships, which to be very clear, I got fuck all of, and even Raid was much less insistent on you purchasing their power-ups or whatever the fuck time relief mechanic than Winter is Coming is. That HBO officially officially licensed such a lazy and transparent joke really tells you the reverence with which they were treating the franchise at this time. The show was ending, the cash cow was dying, and they didn't know how many of her calves would survive infancy, if any at all. They were milking this thing for everything it had. 2019's Game of Thrones Slots Casino is what happens when you mix decades of cascading corporate greed with fucking nothing. It's like pouring an entire glass of Johnny Red and calling it a cocktail. No, I don't want any ice, just leave me to shrivel up and die in the corner. This is beyond words.
There is only one war that matters. The Great War. And it is here.
What the fuck? We live in a joke world, so this has 4.4 stars on the Google Play Store, but I think we can all agree that whoever is responsible for sanctioning this, for making it official, for giving it the Game of Thrones HBO stamp of approval, will never see the light of heaven, will never experience the joy of having a happy life and knowing they've earned it, and will never land on free parking. In Game of Thrones Monopoly. There is no humanity here. Ice and Fire is all about humanity. HBO sold George up the river years ago. This is all HBO's doing, by the way. They have the IP rights and it's solely up to them to sell the license. And we're not even done. 2020 saw Dead by Daylight studio Behavior Interactive release another mobile game, Game of Thrones Beyond the Wall. It appears to be a tactics game, and the trailer alleges a story about going north of the wall to find Bloodraven. This seems like tie-in slop generally, but that's an original idea at least, and it might be the best looking of these mobile games. But in 2022, it looks like the game got a complete overhaul and is now just a Raid Shadow Legends skin. Cool. 2020 also saw another Devolver Digital release, Game of Thrones Tale of Crows, this time from experimental game dev Jake Hollins and the small studio he built for it. It is a mobile venture, but we're a far cry from slots and Raid. I watched the trailer for this and it was genuinely so refreshing after all this crap that I thought I'd give it a go, even though I typically don't have games on my phones because I've got sort of a hardcore bad boy thing going on. Tale of Crows isn't exactly titillating, which I guess mobile games are generally supposed to be, but it was certainly more intriguing than the rest of these. Pull the lever. Oh my god, it's Cersei Lannister. She gave me so many points. No, this is clearly a thing that people cared about and wanted to do something interesting with. The presentation is sleek and suitably atmospheric with a charming bespoke soundtrack. You play as successive Lord Commanders of the Night's Watch in its early history. This is all made up for the game, told through the framing device of people recounting stories. While it is one of the most original games I've ever put on my phone, it is still in essence an idle game. It doesn't stop to beg you for money, it isn't a Skinner box, and I can really see the vision. I think the game is gorgeous, but it's an idle game. The time between events isn't that long, and I can see an active playthrough being someone's jam, but it's just not engaging enough for the squirrels in my brain. Tale of Crows is definitely the diamond in the rough out of these mobile games though. In late 2020, Asmodee released a digital version of the critically acclaimed A Game of Thrones board game, originally by Fantasy Flight Games in 2003. I haven't played the digital version, but the original is a great board game if you're a board game person, and it's not at all a soulless cash grab tie-in. It's a lot like Diplomacy, and I am a Diplomacy enjoyer. The bot opponent in this game is apparently really easy to beat, and the online options are lacking, so maybe stick with the physical version. 4 years passed, and I guess Kit Harington ran out of money or something, because he started appearing in all these ads for Game of Thrones Legends, another Zynga title released in July 2024. It's for your phone, and it's for your mum's phone really, because it's fucking Bejeweled. Game of Thrones Candy Crush. Are you fucking kidding? A bat credit card? I have so much love in my heart for good old PopCap games. Peggle, Zuma, Plants vs. Zombies, all absolute belters to this day. Bonnie's Bookstore! But was it worth it? Because they also made Bejeweled, and a quarter century later, the brooding boy from the Dragon Show is in cringe ads for the worst usage of a supposedly prestige brand I've ever seen. Did Tony Soprano ever have to do a Pac-Man crossover? Oh, and did I mention that they keep emailing me to promote it? Yeah, they do. So I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Game of Thrones Legends. Ignore your family this hollandaise season and play more Bejeweled. That was a joke. This video doesn't have a sponsor, but my band has a new EP out and you can go listen to it.
But I'm shit at singing.
Oh, and they rubbed poor baby Rhaenyra into this too. You leave her out of this! The only comfort to be found here is that defeating the Night King with a match of Bejeweled is legitimately more interesting than what actually happened in the show. Bijon Snood!
We really understand this IP.
It is shocking that Ice and Fire's video game rights have been thrown around like this. Like, it's shameful. I'm sort of disgusted. It hurts that I care about this series so much, and this is what gets done with it. Genuinely, thinking about this has made me more upset than did the end of Game of Thrones. Because while Game of Thrones was declining in quality for years before all that, the games didn't have to be like this. It wasn't already written in stone. Things weren't looking that bad. The 2012 RPG wasn't terrible. The Telltale game was a hit. They made sense as Game of Thrones games. They could have continued to treat the license with some reverence, giving it only to reputable studios with decent ideas for actual games. I don't know exactly what this new King's Road game is going to be, but I mean, just look at it. This is going to be mobile slop. This isn't Reigns or Tale of Crows. This is Conquest. This is Legends. This is Game of Thrones casino slot. The same studio, Netmarble, made Ni no Kuni Cross Worlds, which looks like it cares more than most mobile games, but is ultimately a shiny coat of paint on the same greedy turd. This isn't a game being developed to express or communicate something or see out an interesting idea. It's a game being developed to scam people by abusing their trust in a beloved brand. You got your mum into Game of Thrones 9 years ago because you thought Sansa needed more fans, and now she's going to spend $50 on energy orbs for Game of Thrones cart on her iPhone 8. This is the world that we live in. We have to remember, this wasn't predestined. A series of incompetent or uncaring or unabashedly greedy corporate decisions led to this. A lack of care, a lack of love, a brand direction bereft of artistry brought us here. This is art we're supposed to be making here, right? Aren't video games art? Why else would they have a big dumb awards show? Only art has that sort of thing. grrm loves television, and these days he lets us know when he's not happy about the shows bearing his name. Conversely, George is not a gamer, not avidly at least. He knows his way around Railroad Tycoon apparently, God bless his little cotton socks, but has stated that he actively avoids video games because he knows how much they absorb him. Mood, George. Mood. I haven't played Master of Orion myself, but I can see how you lost a novel to it. I'd have painted my Sistine Chapel by now were it not for Garfield Cart. I think that's a brand new sentence. But if George were a gamer and was keenly tuned into just how mismanaged his beloved creations are in this medium, I think we'd be getting a lot more angry blog posts. Does he know about Game of Thrones slots casino? Has anyone told him about Jon Snow Candy Crush with RPG elements? Or, positive twist to the video's third act nobody could have seen coming, does he know about the Crusader Kings mod? That's right, folks, there are good Game of Thrones games. Scratch that, there are incredible Game of Thrones games. It's just that they all happen to be unofficial, unlicensed passion projects by fans that realistically have no prospect of ever being profitable. And these are not slapdash projects. These are honestly some of the best mods ever made for any game. What strikes me about all of these is that they all make complete sense as games. Like, there's no incongruity between the source material and the format. The Mount and Blade series has players take the role of a medieval knight as they conquer, defend, and manage their own fiefdom. Of course, a game like Bannerlord has a vibrant, beloved, extremely popular Ice and Fire mod, Realm of Thrones. You take one look at Bannerlord and you have to wonder why Tale Worlds and Paradox don't have the Ice and Fire license. I'm not a Bannerlord player myself, but this just looks awesome. It wipes the floor with any other game we've talked about so far. And then there's Westeroscraft, a Minecraft mod of unimaginable scale that scratches the exploration and world building itches of Ice and Fire. It's so easy to treat this like a livable painting and just get lost walking through Westeros. I said near the beginning of this video that Ice and Fire's strengths are its characters, themes, and world. The long and complex history of Westeros is a generational drama unto itself, and the world is a character unto itself. itself. I genuinely cannot conceive of a game more readily able to capture these ideas than the Crusader Kings series. Crusader Kings is a role-playing grand strategy medieval dynasty simulator, and do I even need to go on? You play as some ruler of some place somewhere. Honestly, it's something of a sandbox from there. Your character will die, but so long as they have an heir, you just continue from there, and so on for centuries. You can conquer, build, love, hate. The stories emergent from these games can be so characterful. You will live entire lives here if you can break through the learning curve and become one with the interface. I know it looks like just staring at a fucking map, but it is. But no game has immersed me more than Crusader Kings 2 has. There are loads of so-called overhaul or immersion mods for CK2, but it is such a no-brainer that an Ice and Fire version of this game in particular could be something truly special. And would you look at that? It is. I mean, the base game was already an incest simulator, so a Game of Thrones for CK2 is the best mod of anything I've ever seen. It's the best fan work I've ever seen. It's a truly staggering work of community and a perfect marriage of two independently genre-defining works. CK2 isn't exactly a new game, it came out in 2012, but there is a sequel which also has an Ice and Fire mod, which is also fantastic. CK3 has much higher graphical fidelity than CK2, but due to Paradox's DLC and content pack release scheme, it's typically considered the less complete game of the two, for now at least. The mod is also less complete, but only because it's had much less development time comparatively, and they're adding stuff all the time, like these dragons. Wow. Honestly, pick your poison, they're both brilliant. There's also a Total War mod, which I've heard is good. A Civ of Ice and Fire for Civ 6 looks cool also. Sorry, I don't play any of these games, I don't really know. Perhaps, in some twisted way, this is the best timeline, in spite of the zingers and the yuzus. Crusader Kings 2 is completely free on Steam, and the Game of Thrones mod is completely free too. The only cost of installing it is all of your free time for the rest of your life. George can never find out about this. How do these games do this? How do they have the capacity for such depth when they're mostly made by amateur or semi-professional contributors in their spare time? I think it comes down to passion and community, two things it's very clear HBO has no interest in when it comes to this property. But let's imagine that they do care about those things and that they hand the official license to competent and passionate studio who loves and listens to the Ice and Fire community. Let's get our hopes up and pointlessly speculate about what games could exist if we were allowed to have nice things. An idea that gets thrown around a lot, and for good reason, is basically The Witcher 3 but Game of Thrones, or Red Dead, and some people say Skyrim, but you get it. Open world RPG. And like, yeah, duh, make that. I understand CD Projekt Red is already busy making the coolest shit ever, but the inspiration for this idea typically springs from Dunk. Imagining the player character as a hedge knight wandering through Westeros, taking odd jobs, helping people or hurting them at the player's discretion, perhaps rising through the ranks and becoming a general or a kingsguard or something like that. An important sticking point, I think, and this will be subject to your personal biases, is that a game like this should not try to run concurrently to the events of the main series. Shoehorning run-ins with Jon Snow and Jaime Lannister and so on just sounds sorta icky, tacky, worn. Cringe. It's cringe. Self-insert cringe. Westeros is an entire world with an entire history to play with, and audiences love that. Tale of Crows only sustained my interest for as long as it did because it's set in the ancient myth-shrouded history of the Night's Watch. The Crusader Kings mods let you play basically fucking whenever. Blackfire Rebellion time, Ninepenny Kings time. There's a lot of worthwhile choices, just please not the main series. And for the love of God, we need Ice and Fire games, not Game of Thrones games. I personally fucking love Shadow of Mordor and think that a similar system applied to the Ice and Fire property could have some wonderful emergent stories. Sexy spider lady optional. But if we must indulge the mobile slop, it could at least be fun, you know? Like instead of a fucking slot machine or Bajenga, why not rip off a good mobile game and make a Pokemon Go style dragon catching and breeding ARG? Because it would take some effort? Oh. Well, how about we steer into the goofy and just make Game of Thrones cart? Like, at least that's almost funny enough to justify its own existence. Nintendogs, but it's dragons. What if someone made a video game based on Arcane? Oh, Sonic the Hedgehog, except it's Gendry. Do you get it?
You're the fastest.
Assassin's Creed Bravos sounds fucking epic. Probably have more bugs on release than Helena's bedroom though. Spyro the Dragon, except it's Caraxes. Microsoft Flight Simulator, except instead of an Airbus, you get to pilot Vega. Oh, I know! Bejeweled! Anyway, thanks for tuning into this daily Game of Thrones news update. We'll see you tomorrow when George hopefully accepts my Steam friend request so we can play bean battles together. Apologies for autistically staring at you the whole video, but that's just the way it's gotta be. And yeah, I went the whole video without mentioning Elden Ring. Do you want to fight about it? And in multiverses, you can beat the shit out of Arya Stark as Samurai Jack. This is the greatest game ever made.